Hello, so welcome to the session. So today we will learn about arrow function expressions in JavaScript. What are arrow function expressions? An arrow function expression is a compact alternative to a traditional function expression. So what we will do is we will write a traditional function expression and we will decompose it into an arrow function expression. So let us start. So I'm just declaring a normal function expression here. Add function keyword a, the argument, and the body of the function returning a plus 10. So now when we have to convert this function expression into a an arrow function expression, what we'll have to do is const add, just name it add arrow. First thing which we have to do is get rid of this function keyword. It is not required. So we'll just pass the argument, an arrow symbol, and curly braces, and the body of the function. Okay. So this is a valid arrow function expression where the function keyword is not required and there is an arrow sign between parentheses and the curly braces. We can modify it even further. We can enhance it. So let us do that. Let us call it arrow 1. This becomes arrow 2. So here what we can do even further is, so argument within the parentheses, arrow symbol, and a plus 10. So here what we have done is when the body of the function is only one line of code, we can get rid of the curly braces. So we just write a plus 10 here. Another important thing with arrow function expressions is that the return statement is implicit. So whenever the body of the function has only one line of code, we need not to write the return statement, as well as the curly braces are also not required. So this is also a valid arrow function expression. We can enhance it even further like this, then arrow and a plus 10. So here, when the argument does not have multiple parameters, I mean, there's only one argument which is getting passed, we don't need the parentheses also. We can just directly write the argument here, the variable, and we can write the body of the function when it consists only of one line. So all these three are valid ways to write an arrow function expression. So just to summarize, parentheses, curly braces, and return are not mandatory, but they may be required on case-by-case basis. So we will go through those case-by-case basis now. So when a traditional function has multiple arguments, so multiple arguments, function passing multiple arguments here, the body adding the two here. Now, how do we convert this to an arrow function expression is const multiple arguments arrow. Function keyword is not required. We pass multiple arguments within the parentheses and then the arrow sign. And because there's only one statement, we need not to write it in curly braces, and a return statement is also not required, which is implicit. Now, if we have to convert a function which do not have any arguments, let us write such a function expression here. No arguments. Oh, function, no arguments. It has some body. Let me first define some constants here as well. Another constant, and what we'll do is we'll just return the summation of the two. So this is a normal function expression which does not have any arguments. How do we convert it into, or how do we write it into an arrow function expression is like this: no arguments, arrow. So when we don't have any arguments, we have to provide the parentheses, then the arrow function, and then here in this case, it can be only just one line. So this is a shorthand for this. This is a shorthand. This is a shorthand for the normal function expression. So now when the traditional function has multiple lines of code in the body, let us write such a function here. Multiple body function. Let us pass two arguments here, and let us declare one constant here, and let us add all the three. So this is a normal function expression which has multiple lines of code in the body. Now how do we convert it into an arrow function expression? Multiple arguments arrow. So we pass multiple arguments within parentheses like this. Okay, the name will not be multiple arguments arrow, it will be multiple body arrow, and then arrow sign here. Now because the body has multiple lines, so we have to reintroduce the curly braces. So const check 100, and we have to explicitly write the return statement as well, because the body has multiple lines. So these are the different ways in which we can break down, or we can convert a normal function expression to an arrow function expression. Now let us see how this behaves in an arrow function expression. So the handling of this for arrow functions is different from traditional functions. For traditional functions, this represents the object which has called the function, whereas for arrow functions, this always represents the object which has defined the arrow function. So let us create an object var obj, curly braces, some properties of this particular object. Now here we define an arrow function without any arguments, just console.log this dot I see. Okay, so here again we define another function, but the traditional function expression, again without any arguments, and console.log this dot I. Now we will just call this object, call the methods of this object rather. So this is our arrow function, and this is a normal function method. So let us run this. We will see the difference. Let me clear this out. So here, as you can see, that when we call the method obj.b of this particular object obj, here this basically represents the global scope, because that is where this particular arrow function has been defined. And the global scope, the global this do not have a property or a parameter called I. That is why it is undefined. Whereas when uh, the obj.c method is called, which is a normal function method, so here this represents the object itself. So that is why we can see that it has printed out the value of I. Now going further with one more example of class, let us create a class. Hello. Let us put a constructor with one argument parameter here, and this dot name equals to name, and let us define two more uh, methods of this class. Say hello arrow, without any parameter, and here we will just call this set here, and here we will call an arrow function within set timeout, so without any parameter, so parentheses arrow, and we just do console.log for this dot name, and just putting a timer here. Similarly, we will again define one more method, say hello function without any parameter. So here we again define the same, call the set timeout function. Now within this we will call the function in a normal function, traditional function expression, like not an arrow function expression. So here it goes, and console.log this dot name, and let me put a timer here. Yeah, so you can see that these two methods, say hello arrow and say hello function, they do the same thing. I mean, they call the set timeout function with the same piece of code. The only difference is that the say hello arrow method calls the set timeout function in an arrow function expression format, whereas the other method calls in a normal function expression format. So let us create an object for this class, and pass a name here, and let us call the methods of this particular object. So let us save it, and let us run it. So here you can see that when we call the say hello arrow method here, so the set timeout function is basically able to get the this dot name value. The reason for this is that here this represents the object which has defined this arrow function. Okay, so here it is able to get the value this dot name, whereas in a traditional function expression call here, when we call the say hello function, this represents the global object, because this particular method has been called from here. So this is the difference between uh, an arrow function expression and a normal function expression when it comes to handling the this parameter. Thank you.